Ladies and gentlemen, it is Saturday morning, October 2nd. I believe that's right. I haven't checked the calendar to be precise. Kind of just keep track of everything in my head. I'm back with Sophie Le Corre, and we are here to discuss The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William and Blake. I This might be installment 10. I don't know how many times we've done this, but today we're going to be talking about the fourth memorable fancy in the poem. And typically, I would have Sophie read the whole thing to begin with, but I'm not really sure we should do that today. I feel like we might want to break it off into smaller pieces, Sophie, and kind of
Yes,
go,
I agree.
yeah, because this, I hadn't looked at this in a month. We took a month off, and I was looking over my notes last night, and I was like, wow, this is really strange. This might be the most bizarre part of the poem we've encountered thus far. There's some high strangeness going here. Uh, so maybe we should break it off into smaller chunks. Maybe, I don't know. Which, Sophie, why don't you start with reading and um, maybe just read the first couple of paragraphs and stop when you feel comfortable?
Okay. An angel came to me and said, "Oh, pitiable, foolish young man, oh, horrible, oh, dreadful state. Consider the hot burning dungeon thou art preparing thyself for all eternity, to which thou art going in such career." I said, "Perhaps you will be willing to show me my eternal lot, and we will contemplate together upon it, and see whether your lot or mine is most desirable." So he took me through a stable and through a church and down into the church vault, at the end of which was a mill. Through the mill we went, and came to a cave. Down the winding cavern we groped our tedious way, till a void boundless as nether sky appeared beneath us, and we held by the roots of trees and hung over this immensity. But I said, "If you please, we will commit ourselves to this void, and see whether Providence is here also. If you will not, I will." But he answered, "Do not presume, O young man, but as we here remain, behold thy lot, which will soon appear when the darkness passes away."
I think that'd be a good place to just stop for the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing, this is entitled A Memorable Fancy. And for those of you that have been following along, it's connected to Swedenborg's Memorable Relations. We're even going to get a very direct attack on Swedenborg in this piece. It's not going to be some sort of veiled illusion. He'll come out and say criticism of him. And interestingly, in the Memorable Fancy that parallels the Memorable Relation of Swedenborg, in that fourth memorable relation, Swedenborg presents these supposedly Christian thinkers that are holding court on the origination of the universe and the soul. And they're coming up with all these different cosmogonies for how nature came into existence. And it's all very odd. And there's this priestly character that introduces like God as the ultimate creator of these things. But he's up against individuals that are talking about the sinking and rising of spiritual bodies as a result of their spiritual density or buoyancy. A passage from this that may illustrate that, just one little paragraph. "Then instantly these loves were taken away from them by the Lord, and they were permitted to speak with angels, from from whose conversation they in that state perceived that there is a God and that they were living after death in another world. Wherefore they were covered with shame and exclaimed, we were mad, we were mad. But as this was not their own proper state, and as after a few minutes it became tiresome and unpleasant, they turned away from the priest and were unwilling to listen to him any longer. So they returned to their former loves, which were merely natural, worldly, and corporeal. And they went away toward the left, passing from one society to another. And finally they came to a path where the delights of their own loves breathed upon them. And they said, let us go this way. And they went, and descending, they came at length to those who were in the delights of similar loves, and they went on. And as their delight was a delight in doing evil, and as they did evil to many on the way, they were imprisoned and became demons. And then their delight was changed to undelight, because by punishments and fears of punishment, they were curbed and restrained from their former delight, which constituted their nature. Now, there's many more passages I could have pulled from. But that gives you a taste of what Swedenborg is talking about in the memorable relation. So I wanted to give us that background information. Sophie, what do you have to say so far?
Yes, when I read this sentence, there was a sentence in the paragraphs I just read which made me think about Dostoevsky's the brothers Karamazov, because in the end of the brothers Karamazov, one of the three brothers, Mitya, is having how do you say this? A religious, perhaps epiphany or something, when he thinks about his condemnation, and he sees himself as an underground man. And I just found I have the brothers Karamazov in English. Perhaps I could read some of it, because there was this sentence from the paragraph we read.
Do you have the passage from the Brothers Karamazov pulled up, or do you have to take a look for it?
No, I have it. I just I have it opened in my computer, so I can read it. But I wanted to make the connection with Blake's poem.
Which is the particular sentence that you're identifying?
Sorry, I'm just reading the few paragraphs we just read.
Well, I mean, it's probably all in there. I mean, rather than trying to pick it out.
Okay, yes,
I
found it. I found it. If you please, we will commit ourselves to this voice and see whether providence is here also. And this is this idea that even in hell we can find providence. And this idea is also expressed by Mitya in the Brothers Karamazov, when he talks about the underground, and we could say that the underground is also like hell, and the underground was also the place where miners, you say miners in English, the people
Yes.
who, where they work. And Mitya said, yes, life is full, there is life even underground. You wouldn't believe, Alexei, how I want to live now, what a thirst for existence and consciousness has sprung up in me within these peeling walls. Ratikin doesn't understand that. All he cares about is building a house and letting flats. But I've been longing for you. And what is suffering? I am not afraid of it. Even if it were beyond reckoning, I am not afraid of it now. I was afraid of it before. Do you know, perhaps, I won't answer at the trial at all. And I seem to have such strength in me now that I think I could stand anything, any suffering, only to be able to say and to repeat to myself every moment, I exist. In thousands of agonies, I exist. I am tormented on the rack, but I exist. Though I sit alone on a pillar, I exist. I see the sun, and I don't see the sun. I know it's there. And there's a whole life in that, in knowing that the sun is there. Alyosha, my angel, all these philosophies are the death of me. And there is another sentence, and I need to find it because he talks about, yes, what should I be underground there without God? Ratikin's laughing. If they drive God from the earth, we shall shelter him underground. One cannot exist in prison without God. It's even more impossible than out of prison. And then we men underground will sing from the bowels of the earth a glorious hymn to God, with whom is joy. Hail to God and his joy, I love him. So it's one of the three brothers who is condemned to forced labor because of the trial, which is the topic of the main topic of the novel. And what Mitya seems to say is that a new kind of faith can be born from difficult experiences, and also that maybe in a world where especially maybe it's not the same in the United States, but in Europe there is a lot of atheism right now, and Dostoevsky was perhaps predicting that what was going to happen in Russia with the communist regime, where people were not allowed to be Christians, and the experience of Christian during the how do you say this in English?
USSR?
The communist regime, they were forced to hide themselves, to hide their faith, and it made their faith stronger.
I think you see the same thing that's going on within China. Apparently, the church is growing underground at a tremendous rate that's not talked about in that country where it is suppressed. And as far as what's going on in America, religion tends to thrive the more totalitarian things become in a lot of places. So I think there's a growing sense of a tyrannous proclivity in America. And you see, I just saw an article this past week where apparently a lot of teenagers are becoming very Christian now as a result of growing up in this culture for the past 15, 16, 17, 18 years. So it looks like in America we have a more religious wave generation coming on. I'm not exactly sure, how you measure all these things. There's so much flux and in dynamic. I don't really know. I can only really speak to my own personal experience. And what happens in France is way different than it happens in America, because I mean France was primarily a Catholic country for so long. Or I'm not exactly sure what the how much of a Protestant presence you guys had there. I mean, I'm sure you did, but it was the
They
majority of
were
the
they were
majority.
persecuted.
Yeah. But I mean, it's always as so insofar it was a Christian country, it was a Catholic country, and you know what?
Yes, but since the second part of the 20th century, the number of Christian uh, has be, has been decreasing more and more.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have our own. We've definitely had our own percolation of atheism in America since the Second World War, and there are a lot of reasons for that. But perhaps connected to Blake, perhaps not. But I think what's interesting, you brought up this point before you brought in the Dostoevsky that God's providence extended to the underworld, and I thought it was kind of a bit of an open question at this point in the poem. If you please, we will commit ourselves to this void and see whether providence is here also. If you will not, I will. Like it's like, okay, does providence extend to the underworld? But he answered, do not presume, O young man. So the angel is like, don't you make any presumptions. But as we here remain, behold thy lot, which will soon appear when the darkness passes away. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but it seems to me um, that at least in Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, that providence may not extend here. But we'll have to ask ourselves, because I think it'll get back into Blake's poem, The Tiger, and the conclusions that he came there. Do you mind if I read the next little section?
No, go on.
Okay. So, I remained with him, sitting in the twisted root of an oak. He was suspended in a fungus which hung with the head downward into the deep. By degrees, we beheld the infinite abyss, fiery as the smoke of a burning city. Beneath us, at an immense distance, was the sun, black but shining. Round it were fiery tracks on which revolved vast spiders, crawling after their prey, which flew or rather swum in the infinite deep in the most terrific shapes of animals sprung from corruption. And the air was full of them and seemed composed of them. These are devils and are called powers of the air. I now asked my companion which was my eternal lot. He said, between the black and white spiders. So I found this interesting for several reasons. As they're going into this abyss, there's talk about seeing a black sun. So you have to, they're going down into the underworld. And there's, I don't know what exactly the cosmology or the folklore that Blake's working with in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, but, or maybe he's just describing what modern earth scientists would talk as the core of the earth, but there being some sort of black sun underground is interesting. And that these spiders, these devil spiders, are swimming in the infinite deep in its tracks. And the angel says, oh, in his prognostication, your eternal lot is going to be between these black and white spiders. So I guess that would be some sort of gray spider demon is the future of our um of our narrator here. Okay, and we're back. We had some minor technical difficulties there, but before the disruption, we were talking about how the fate of our narrator was going to be somewhere between these black and white spiders that are devils of the ether or air or whatever medium we find in this underworld. And I think at that point, I asked Sophie what she thought of all of this. And then she was like, I can't hear you because you're inept at technology. So, what was the point you were trying to make, Sophie?
Yes, this these few lines made me think about when we are dreaming. It's a very common theme in dreams, I think, of dreaming of another world which is parallel to this one but underground. And maybe someone like Jung would say it's the collective unconscious, because he said that he had this concept of the transcendent function, which is the result of the conflict between the conscious and the unconscious, and so we could see the unconscious as a parallel reality from this one, and what Blake is describing is this reality has a sun as well, and it's like a dark version of this reality.
Yeah, this idea of there being a black sun is something that I think is pervasive in occult alchemical literature. I'm not exactly sure what it means.
Yes,
I mean,
Jung wrote about this.
Yeah, the Nazis were sort of fixated with the black sun, and there's that song by Soundgarden called "Black Hole Sun." But you're saying,
Yes,
Jung talks about it as well.
I think he talks about it in one of his books about alchemy.
I'm just I did a quick Wikipedia look at this black sun concept. And I have no idea if it has any connection to what Blake's talking about. But the black sun is a Nazi symbol, a type of sun wheel employed in post-Nazi Germany context by neo-Nazis and in some strains of Satanism. The symbol's design consists of 12 radial sig runes, similar to the symbols employed by the SS in their logo. It first appeared in Nazi Germany as a design element in a castle at Wewelsburg, remodeled and expanded by the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, which he intended to be a center for the SS. Just skipping ahead. Its association with the occult originates with a 1991 German novel, Die Schwarze Sonne von Tashi Lehuppo, The Black Son of Tashi Lehuppo, by Russell McLeod. So yeah, I can't go into the Black Sun more than that at this moment, but it's a big thing in both Nazism, occult circles, and Satanism.
Yes, and I was searching for Jung and what he said about the black sun, and I found something.
What he said?
Yes. So it's in a letter he wrote on the black sun, Solnigger, to Wellman W. Schmidt. So it's a letter from the 5th of November 1942. With regard, he talks about Baudelaire.
Oh.
With regard to your question about the black sun, Baudelaire's Soleil Noir is by no means an exception. The idea of a counter-earth, for instance, in the Pythagorean system, and we find the Sol Nigger in alchemy, also the Ignis Nigger. The corresponding idea of a black moon does not exist, because this would coincide with the new moon, and so is already anticipated. The moon plays a considerable role with women, while the sun vision occurs with both women and men. The question of women's initiation pictures is obscure insofar as the archetypal material in this respect is not nearly so extensive as men's. This for the simple reason that the initiations were evolved and handed down chiefly by men. Nevertheless, there are all sorts of clues in Greek mythology, also in primitive psychology. So, yes, he's not talking about the black sun anymore, but I think he wrote about the black sun in one of his books about alchemy. I wonder if it's in Mysterium Conjunctionis or he has another book which is Psychology and Alchemy. And I wonder, I have this book so I can just make a quick search, and if I don't find something quickly, we can go on. But if I can find something quickly, maybe it will be interesting.
Yeah, what I might do while you're searching is to read the next little part just so there's not a gap here. Is that okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
you can do
And we can,
this.
yeah. But now from between the black and white spiders, a cloud and fire burst and rolled through the deep, blackening all beneath, so that the nether deep grew black as a sea and rolled with a terrible noise. Beneath us was nothing now to be seen but a black tempest. Still looking east between the clouds and the waves, we saw a cataract of blood mixed with fire, and not many stones' throw from us appeared and sunk again the scaly fold of a monstrous serpent. At last, to the east, distant about 3 degrees, appeared a fiery crest above the waves. Slowly it reared like a ridge of golden rocks, till we discovered 2 globes of crimson fire, from which the sea fled away in clouds of smoke. And now we saw it was the head of Leviathan. His forehead was divided into streaks of green and purple, like those on a tiger's forehead. Soon we saw his mouth and red gills hang just above the raging foam, tinging the black deeps with beams of blood, advancing toward us with all the fury of a spiritual existence. My friend the angel climbed up from his station into the mill. I remained alone, and then this appearance was no more, but I found myself sitting on a pleasant bank beside a river by moonlight, hearing a harper who sung to the harp, and his theme was, "The man who never alters his opinion is like standing water and breeds reptiles of the mind." So there's a lot to say there. Did you find the Black Sun in the Jung books
Yes,
that you have?
yes, there is I found a lot of results. And I wanted to say, we talked about women, the symbology of. It makes me think also about the Chamber of Secret in Harry Potter.
A few years before my time. I'm not up on the sky croquet playing magicians like you younger kids are.
Yes, and in Harry Potter novels, the second novel is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And in this novel, at the end of the book, he goes rescuing his best friend's sister, who has been taken by, well, I'm not going to reveal all the story, but there is a big snake involved, and so a basilisk, and the chamber, it is said, some literature teachers or students have analyzed this scene, and they said that it was also full of symbols of women sexuality. And it seems that Blake's description has some also makes me think about that when he talks about blood, and I don't know, maybe there is a similar symbolism related to the underground symbols. It makes me think of that, and also the Leviathan. Leviathan, it is a biblical monster which is present in the book of Job.
Yes, and in other places. Leviathan is in a couple places in the Old Testament. It's in Psalms 74:14 as a multi-headed sea serpent that is killed by God and given to food as the Hebrews in the wilderness. It's also in Isaiah 27:1. The Leviathan is a serpent and a symbol of Israel's enemies who will be slain by God. And like you said, Job 41 is a sea monster and a symbol of God's power of creation. But what's interesting is Blake describes the forehead of the Leviathan being like that. It has streaks of green and purple, but it's like that of the tiger's forehead. And that's what I was going to mention that in this that he's referencing the tiger. Well, that's one of Blake's most famous poems that's coupled with the lamb, and it's a kind of an open question about whether or not God made the tiger for Blake. It seems to be sort of a Luciferian Promethean creation. And if he's associating the Leviathan with tiger, then we have a question going on here about, what has actually made this Leviathan, at least for Blake. So I wanted to bring that to bear on this.
Yes. Do you want me to read a few lines about the black sun?
Sure, I'm interested to hear what Jung had to say about it. There's also a Death Cab for Cutie song called Black Sun, if memory serves me correctly.
Yes, so there are a lot of results, but I found a note in which he's defining the soul nigger, which is the Latin word, the Latin expression for the black sun. Oh, sorry, my PDF file is a bit slow. I cannot see the text.
It's okay.
Okay.
Well, has it rendered yet?
Sorry, it's
If not, we'll just wait as it's pulling up there. The other thing I was going to point out here about this passage is that when the angel leaves and goes to the station to the mill, he's all by himself, and it's almost like the entire environment changes, and he begins to hear this harper, and he's singing this song. The man who never alters his opinion is like standing water and breeds reptiles of the mind. So one of the things I think is interesting that'll become apparent to us later in this is that when the angel leaves, his perception of what's going on in this environment changes. But this line about the man who never alters his opinion is like standing water and breeds reptiles of the mind. I suppose this might speak to your point, Sophie, about this being kind of a Jungian psychological, all of it occurring within, that these monsters are the result of our inability to be ideologically flexible. And so that we start to create these monstrous entities, these psychological entities. How's your file rendering now? Can you read the citations that you wanted to bring up?
Yes, I've read it but it's not as interesting as I thought.
Well, can you paraphrase? Can you paraphrase it? Or give us the gist of it? A summation.
Yes, actually, it's difficult because there is a lot of paragraphs in which he's talking about the soul nigger, but he's saying that it is a counter sun, which just as there is an invisible sun enclosed in the center of the earth. So it seems that it is a symbol which is very common in mythology.
Seems like Blake, the Nazis, and perhaps Jung himself are flirting with some sort of hollow Earth theory.
I don't know. Like what you said about the quote about, oh, okay, so I found something else. The soul, which is the sun, who personifies the feminine unconscious, is not the sun of the day, but correspond rather to the soul nigger. So maybe it's, yes, it is not the real soul nigger of masculine psychology, the alter ego, the brother Medardes of E.T.A. Hoffman's story, the Devil Elixir, or the crass identity of opposites which meet with Jekyll and Hyde. The unconscious soul of woman may be dark, but it is not coal black. As was said of the moon, it is more like a chronic eclipse of the sun, which in any case is seldom total. Normally a woman's consciousness emits as much darkness as light, so that if her consciousness cannot be entirely light, her unconscious cannot be entirely dark either. At any rate, when the lunar phases are repressed on account of too powerful solar influences, her consciousness takes on another bright solar character, while on the other hand her unconscious becomes darker and darker, nigrum nigrius nigro, and both are endurable for both in the long run. Her soul nigger is as void of light and charm as the gentling moonlight is heavenly peace and magic. It protests too much that it is a light because it is no light, and a great truth because it invariably misses the mark, and a high authority. So it goes to the next page. Or is only as right as the blind tomcat who tried to catch imaginary bats in broad daylight, but one day caught a real one by mistake, and thereafter became completely unteachable. I do not want to be unfair, but that is what the feminine soul is like when it obtrudes too much.
Interesting stuff.
I wonder if it's a bit misogynist. I don't know.
What's that?
I wonder if Jung is a little bit misogynist.
I don't. Yeah, he was. Yeah. Given the time that he was writing, I think he's a
So
product of that era.
it seems that the dark sun is something which is a symbol of feminine psychology. That's what he said after this. So it's related to women.
I don't know. You know, there's a lot of there's a lot of research to be done on the black sun. It seems to be a very important symbol, a deeply held belief by a lot of different strains of thought. And I don't know if they can all be synthesized, but at least we know where to look on some of this now. And I have no idea what Blake was drinking from when he talked about this black sun. Perhaps it's in the work of perhaps it's in the work of Swedenborg. I don't know.
Yes, and when we see the cover of Blake's poem, the main painting, maybe there is something related to his relationship with women. I don't know, and it seems to be what the author of the book I've read as a preparation for this podcast series said, that the book, the poem is about Blake's psychology and maybe his relationship with his animal, as Jung would say, his feminine side.
Right, right. Well, while you were looking for all of that, we I went ahead and I read this part about the Leviathan and the angel leaving and the harper being left behind to sing this part about um, not changing your mind creates reptiles. What did you have anything to say about these passages, or should we move on to the next part?
Yes, the fact that if you don't change your it makes me think about something I've read this week about Nietzsche, because Nietzsche was very uh, something which was very important to him was to never stop questioning himself, and so this is something he would say as well. He considered himself as a someone who never uh, stops somewhere in his thoughts. He always he didn't have a home when it comes to philosophical thought. He didn't want to belong to a system of thoughts. He always want to question himself and his opinions.
Right, and yet he, for whatever reason, you can blame it on his sister. He ends up creating a, many people claim, an ideological framework that's going to be hijacked by Nazism itself. So it
Yes,
would have been interesting if Nietzsche was around during the time the emergence of Nazism. If he would have been just exactly what his posture towards it would have been. I mean, I know everybody wants to be an apologist towards Nietzsche, but we just don't know. Just don't know.
yes, it's strange that he would. I don't. He's. He claimed a lot that he didn't want. He was an against systematic philosophy. Like Kierkegaard, they had this in common. They did not want to build philosophical systems, and I think that on the contrary, that what the Nazis wanted and Nietzsche's sister, they wanted to have a philosophical system which would justify their ideology and their political power.
Yeah, obviously some paradoxes to work through there. An interesting thing that I discovered today is that I think I probably discovered before, but I reminded myself of it, is that Nietzsche and Neil Armstrong died on the same day, August 25th. And the song Thus Spake Zarathustra is a major theme in 2001 Space Odyssey. I find these to be all interesting synchronicities. But what about this? Can we move on to this next section about arising? But I arose and sought for the mill. Would you read that part for us?
Uh, yes, I can read it if you want.
Yeah. Why don't you go? Yeah, just why don't you read it until the part about the analytics? Um,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead and read that. Go ahead and read that. Where is it? I answered, we impose on one another. Go ahead and read that whole bit.
uh, I'm looking for. I don't find it. I find, but I arose.
Just start there now. Just start there. You'll find it. Just read.
But I arose and sought for the mill, and there I found my angel, who, surprised, asked me how I escaped. I answered, all that we saw was owing to your metaphysics. For when you ran away, I found myself on a bank by moonlight, hearing a harper. But now we have seen my eternal lot. Shall I show you yours? He laughs at my proposal, but I, by force, suddenly caught him in my arms and flew westerly through the night, till we were elevated above the earth's shadow, and I flung myself with him directly into the body of the sun. Here I clothed myself in white, and taking in my hand Swedenborg's volumes, sunk from the glorious climb, and passed all the planets till we came to Saturn. Here I stayed to rest, and then leaped into the void between Saturn and the fixed stars. Here, said I, is your lot, in this space, if space it may be called. Soon we saw the stable and the church, and I took him to the altar and opened the Bible, and lo, it was a deep pit into which I descended, driving the angel before me. Soon we saw the 7 houses of brick. One we entered. In it were a number of monkeys, baboons, and all that species, chained by the middle, grinning and snatching at one another, but withheld by the shortness of their chains. However, I saw that they sometimes grew numerous, and then the weak were caught by the strong, and with the grinning aspect first coupled them and then devoured, by plucking off first one limb and then another till the body was left a helpless trunk, after grinning and kissing it, with seeming fondness they devoured too. And here and there I saw one severely picking the flesh off his own tail. At the stench terribly annoyed us both, we went into the mill, and I, in my hand, brought the skeleton of a body, which in the mill was Aristotle Analytics. Though the angel said, Thy fantasy has imposed upon me, and thou ought to be ashamed. I answer, we impose on one another, and it is but lost time to converse with you whose works are only analytics.
Okay, there's a lot going on here, a lot of high strangeness. I'm not going to pretend like I understand the entire thing. What's interesting, when he's getting questioned about how did you escape, he said, all that we saw was owing to your metaphysics, for when you ran away, I found myself on a bank by moonlight hearing a harper. So he's saying like a vision is imposed upon him, and he's going to do the same. He's going to impose a vision upon this angel, however that's going to happen. And again, I think we have some interesting cosmology or whatever. He hurtles towards the sun, but because he's got Swedenborg's volumes with him, they're not going to go to this celestial glorious climb, and they're going to descend until they go past Saturn and shows him this void that's between Saturn and the fixed stars. It's interesting. I think you pointed when you came across the word Saturn. How do you say Saturn in French?
Saturn.
Saturn, because you said it's interesting. It's very much connect. We get not a lot of people understand this, but there's some interesting etymological connections between Saturn, Saturnalia, Saturday, and perhaps Satan himself. So as what the planet represents in some esoteric circles. And it's interesting the cosmology that Blake is working upon here. That he's sinking deepest between Saturn and there's this void. He's talking about fixed stars, the stars that do not change their paths in comparison to the wandering stars, or what we call planets like Saturn. This is how people used to think about these things. Of course, now we are very, very smart, and we know so much about the universe, and we know that it's only an illusion that the stars are fixed. So we are so much wiser now. Um, what what do you want to say about this?
Yes,
This
Satan is Jung talks a lot about Satan, and it makes me think about the conjunction between Satan and Jupiter
Oh yes, it's a very
that
important
we
one. Very important one.
observed. Was it last winter? Yes, I think it was during the winter holidays.
It happens every 19 years or something, right?
Yes, but the one we observed recently was quite exceptional, I think. It was not that like the usual ones because
Ooh,
they were very close to one another in the sky, at least as we saw them. And I think Jung wrote about this, and the last time it happened was when before Jesus Christ was born, and maybe it's even what the oh, how do you say this in English? The
the
three
Magi,
kings. Yeah,
wise.
maybe that's what they saw, and so I've read just now. I have a note from the Red Book. So it was a note by the editor of the Red Book of Jung, and he said that the conjunction of Satan and Jupiter representing the union is representing the union of extreme opposites, which would place the birth of Christ under Pisces. Pisces, the which is the sign in astrology, and the Jung Pisces is Latin for fishes, and it is known as the sign of the fish, and is often represented by two fish swimming in opposite directions. In the Platonic months, see Alice Howell, Jungian synchronicity in astrological signs and ages. So I've read about this in Jung's book Ion, and he wrote about this conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, and I wonder if Saturn is representing as well the Israel, or the Hebrew yes, it would represent Israel, and Jupiter would represent royalty or king symbol, and that's why the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter would mean the king of Israel, and which is a synchronicity if we take into account that there was this conjunction before Christ was born.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked it up a little bit. I mean, the one that we had in 2020 was supposedly the best one that we had in 800 years, according to Scientific American, and this has been going on for a long time. It gets into some interesting questions about whether or not this could actually be the Bethlehem star, this conjunction. Um, there's a lot of interesting, we have these apps and whatnot now that allow us to kind of go back in time and rewind what was going on in the heavens when these earthly events occurred. I think I
Oh,
think so. I think it raises it raises an interesting question. If we do identify this conjunction as being the Bethlehem star, you should be more accurately to pinpoint when Christ was born. The the issue with which everyone acknowledges right now is that I think everybody knows that Christ was not born on December 25th. And so you've got some other potential candidates out there. I I can't prove it, but I think I know when Christ was probably born. I don't know if it has anything to do with this conjunction. I'll have to look deeper into that. But Yeah, I think he was probably born on a certain day in September.
Yes, I just have before my eyes a book of speaking interviews of Jung, and someone else is writing about Jung, and he wrote. Uh, Jung stated that at the birth of Christ, Saturn, the maleficent god, and Jupiter, the beneficent god, were so near to each other that they were almost one star, and that is the star of Bethlehem, when the new self, yes, the
So
star of
Jung said it was the Bethlehem star.
someone who is paraphrasing Jung.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what he exactly said, but he probably said something like this. When the new self, Christ, good and evil, was born. Jung then associated to this by telling two stories about people. A man told Jung about a Quaker who seemed a perfectly good man. So where was his shadow? Jung asked about his wife. Apparently she was perfect too. His children. Oh, said the enquirer, one of them is a thief. In Jung's words, he went out wagging his tail. The second story concerned a theologian without a shadow, but it turned out that his son was getting into the way of forging checks. Jung's comment was that the son assumes the father's shadow. His father was stealing, you see, from God his sins. The son was punished for the father's sins not rendered to God. So, yes, Jungian psychology is about one is about becoming a complete human being, and in order to do this, you must integrate. You must become aware of your shadow, and it seems that the person he's talking about, he's thinking that he's a perfectly good man. He's a theologian who tries to live in a very ethical way, and he's not aware of his shadow. And his son is actually representing this part of himself which he's not aware of. And what we are talking about with Blake, it seems that it's the same topic, that Blake and the angel, they are representing the entire human psyche, which in which there is both good and evil.
Right. Gosh, you've covered so much Jung. I need to catch up with you on him. I just got his Tavistock lectures and his correspondences with Wolfgang Pauli, Atoms and Archetypes.
So we were talking about Saturn, and then yes, when they go to the sun, it makes me think about a dream I had. I had a similar dream in which I was staring at the sun, and it seems to be a very powerful symbol which can happen in dreams. And the sun is can make you blind if you are staring at the sun. It has a double how can we say this? It can bring light, but it can also bring darkness.
Right. That's what they say. I've never tried it. Uh, Going back to the text, what do you make of this bit about? I mean, we've got so much weirdness going on here.
Yes, with the monkeys.
Oh my gosh, this is so
It's so
weird.
strange. They are killing one another.
Yeah, here said I is your lot in the space, a space it may be called. And they go to this altar, open the Bible, they jump into the Bible, and then there are these 7 houses of brick, and I'm sure that's representative of something. And we got all these monkeys and baboons who are chained up, and they're snatching at each other. And then they start like tearing a body apart and eating it in fondness. And I mean, I don't know what is going on here. And then he says, an eye in my hand brought the skeleton of a body, which in the mill was Aristotle's analytics. So he's like trying to make some sort of analogy that Aristotle's analytics is like like some skeleton, some that is part of this demented world of cannibalizing monkeys. Do you have any idea what he's trying to say here? I mean, the
Yeah,
analytics is like some kind of it's like logic.
yes, I'm searching for it in the book Blake, Jung and the Collective Unconscious by Judy June Singer, which is about the marriage of heaven and hell. But it makes me think about when you talk about Aristotle analytics. I wonder if Aristotle was the one who talked about the excluded third in logic. Um, I'm just going to look for this because it's very important, this idea of the included or excluded third, excluded middle.
Right,
Yes.
excluded middle.
Is it Aristotle who wrote about this, or I'm not sure. Yes,
Well,
it's Aristotle. It's Aristotle. Yes, it's the earliest known formulation is in Aristotle's discussion of the principle of non-contradiction, first proposed on interpretation, when he says that two of contradictory propositions, where one proposition is the negation of the other, one must be true and the other false. He also states it as a principle in the Metaphysics book, saying that it is necessary in every case to affirm or deny, and that it is impossible that there should be anything between the two parts of a contradiction. Aristotle wrote it. I'm reading Wikipedia, the Wikipedia article about the law of excluded middle. Aristotle wrote that ambiguity can arise from the use of ambiguous names, but cannot exist in the facts themselves. So I've studied this Aristotle analytics when I studied computer science. Actually, that's what we study when we learn how to develop programs, because the usually computers software are built on the Aristotle logic. But what is funny is that quantum physics is contradicting Aristotle logic. And
most definitely.
there is a tradition. I think the a lot of traditions like alchemy or perhaps esoteric school, they believed in an opposite. They had an opposite belief, which is the included third, I think. And I'm going to search for the English translation of this. Is it the included third, or in French it's tiers inclus, and I wonder it's and this would mean an opposite concept from Aristotle, a logic which would bring the opposites together. And I think it's the theme of Blake's book. It's the marriage of heaven and hell. So Blake is trying to find another logic in which the opposites are not incompatible with one another, but there is a way to unite them.
Well, I don't know if there's anything unified in this vision that he's imposed upon the angel with these monkeys that are in chains devouring one another.
Yes,
it seems like it's like retribution almost for scaring him with the taking him into the abyss and the confrontation with the Leviathan. He's like, oh well, you know, you can terrify me, I can terrify you. There might be a little bit more here as he goes on to talk about monkeys a little bit more that might help us understand.
Yes, but now it makes me think that it may be about this. It may be about the opposites, the conflict between the opposites. We see, especially it's very visible in politics when the opposites ideologies fight against one another. And it seems that I wonder if Blake is talking about this, if he's talking about people having opposite beliefs and values fighting against one another and being unable to reconcile, to see that reality is more paradoxical and complex and than they think, and they should be able to consider the opposite opinion and not only their own.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that ambiguity might be brought out in these different visions that they impose upon one another in the different locales, because as soon as the angel departs, his frightening vision goes away, and he's in the underworld, and he's just by a bank with a harper, and now they're supposedly in this void between Saturn and the fixed stars, which I guess, given the cosmology they're working off of, might be closer to a paradisical realm. And we've got this thing where like subhumans cannibalizing one another. So it's kind of like the ambiguity becomes not so much that the visions are mixed, but the locales that they're mixed in, and that's potentially where the ambiguity is, right? Because we get this mixture of perhaps the underworld isn't as bad as it is portrayed by the angel that gives the vision to the narrator, and perhaps the paradisical realm is not as wondrous as it's portrayed, given those who have adopted certain cosmologies and the proximity to God. And maybe that's what Blake is trying to bring out here.
Yes, I think that's what he wants to express. And
Still there?
I think he wants to express some of these ideas, and that's why I said before that maybe Blake is quite close to Taoism. How do you say this in English?
Taoism.
Yes, this idea that there is some darkness within light and some light within darkness, like in the yin yang symbol. There is a dot of white in the black region and a dot of black within the white region.
Right. The yin and the yang.
Yes.
Well, how about we do this last little bit, and because we've been going for a while here, close out this memorable fancy. Is it my turn to read or is it yours? I forget.
I think it's your turn.
Okay. I have always found that angels have the vanity to speak of themselves as the only wise. This they do with a confidence, insolence sprouting from systematic reasoning. Thus, Swedenborg boasts that what he writes is new, though it is only the contents or index of already published books. A man carried a monkey about for a show, and because he was a little wiser than the monkey, grew vain and conceived himself as much wiser than 7 men. It is so with Swedenborg. He shows the folly of churches and exposes hypocrites, till he imagines that all are religious and himself the single one on earth that ever broke a net. Now hear a plain fact. Swedenborg has not written one new truth. Now hear another. He has written all the old falsehoods. And now hear the reason. He conversed with angels who are all religious, and conversed not with devils who all hate religion, for he was incapable through his conceited notions. Thus, Swedenborg's writings are a recapitulation of all superficial opinions and an analysis of the more sublime, but no further. Have now another plain fact. Any man of mechanical talents may, from the writings of Paracelsus or Jacob Boehme, produce 10,000 volumes of equal value with Swedenborg's, and from those of Dante or Shakespeare an infinite number. But when he has done this, let him not say that he knows better than his master, for he only holds a candle in sunshine. So we get this analogy of Swedenborg being thinking too great of himself because he has tamed a monkey, and he's only really consulting with angels that concern themselves with analytics and not the variety of experiences, not what devils have to say. And so Swedenborg imagines himself to be wiser and better, but really he's still caught up in the systematic philosophy, which I suppose here is being represented by Aristotle's analytics, and that he's really saying nothing new. And if you really wanted to say something new and interesting, he'd do well to consult alchemists and individuals like Dante or Shakespeare. He could and come up with something just as good, if not better. But even if he were, he's not to take some sort of pride in it, because it's like, oh, congratulations, I'm holding a candle in the sunshine. You're not really supplying any new light. You're kind of already contributing to what's there. I mean, that's my very crude paraphrase of what we just read.
Yes, yes, I think that's what it's a good summary of what Blake is saying. And I think Blake is defending the poets against the philosophers, or actually the philosophers which are building systems, as we talked about. And Blake is more admirative of people who are writing using their poetic inspiration, their genius.
Right.
Whereas if you use only analytics and Aristotle logic, you will only repeat what has already been said.
Yeah. I think we covered it. I think we covered it. I think the point you're making about the distinction between poets and philosophers is well taken. Well,
I,
I think we've been at it for a while. Do you want to say anything in closing? I think we've been at it probably like an hour and a half, maybe close to 2 hours. So I can't quite remember
yes.
with our little, but I think we've done a decent job covering the fourth memorable fancy. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, we are going to see in the next episode uh, what's going to happen between Blake and his angel.
Well, you might be a little ahead of me. I haven't had a chance to break that down yet, but I look forward to that, and we'll bring that to you next time. I want to thank Sophie and for everybody to listening. If you have the opportunity, download the Noetic app, and yeah, thank you again, Sophie.
Thank you, Luke, and I hope everyone is enjoying our metaphysical discussions about Blake.
It's funny when I just realized our time difference. I had been looking away from the screen while we did this podcast, and it was light, and now it's dark there now. And I've been looking at my notes while we were talking. So